Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy, and welcome back to another movie review. I'm Chris, joined with Tate to give my review on Tolkien, which is the 2019 biographical drama film based on the life of J.R.R. Tolkien, the writer of such works as The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, and The Silmarillion. You guys know who J.R.R. Tolkien is. So Tate, you've seen the trailers for this thing.
Yes, I have.
Actually, this was one of my... I don't know if I was like bouncing out of my chair, like excited for this movie, but it was definitely one of the ones that I was most intrigued about this year of 2019. Certainly because Tolkien is my favorite writer. He's created my favorite mythology ever with Middle Earth, and I was really hoping I needed this one to be good. Like this could have gone. And in fact, like in the world we live in with biopics, I'm very surprised that it's taken them this long to do one on Tolkien. Certainly with like how prolific the Lord of the Rings film trilogy was, and with the Hobbit films coming out, I'm very surprised it's taken them this long. I think the script for this one originally was written around 2013, something like that. So clearly it was written
in the works for a while then.
Yeah, definitely. I just don't know. Maybe it's like flip-flop from different directors and everything like that. This is directed by a guy called Dome Kurakowski or Kurowski. I don't know how to pronounce it. He's a Finnish director. I've seen nothing he's done. Apparently he's one of the most famous Finnish directors there is, but then again, how many Finnish directors do you know?
I wouldn't be able to name any off the top of my head.
I don't know how
it intrigues me to actually see.
What's interesting is that Tolkien's language that he invented, even in the film they say this, when he's like reading it out to his professor, he says like, oh, I'm detecting some Finnish inspirations in this. So maybe that's why they went with a Finnish director. Apparently, it was always his dream. I don't know if this was the screenwriter or the director himself. It was always their dream to do an adaptation of the Lord of the Rings films, but obviously Peter Jackson beat them to the punch in 2001.
Yes. In fact, I haven't seen this film. Obviously, I'm just going to be bouncing ideas off Chris here from what I've seen in the trailer. One thing that I can say, though, is this film, without even seeing it, has actually taught me how to pronounce Tolkien correctly.
How are you pronouncing it?
I always pronounce it Tolkien.
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 Okay. That's fairly close. Like
or Tolkien. I when I was younger, I thought it was J.R.R.Tolkien.
Tolkien.
Okay. Tolkien. Yeah, it's unusual just from the trailer.
In the movie, his teacher originally calls him Tolkien, and then he has to correct him on that. But I don't know. There's probably loads of pronunciations, but no, Tolkien is the way it's pronounced. So yeah, I mean, are you going to be firing questions at me?
Yes. I don't know how to be firing questions at you. I'm assuming this is going to be a full-out spoiler review for anyone who has not seen the film, and I know it hasn't been released in America yet.
I'm going to try not to go into spoilers all too much, but I mean, it's based on the life, like all the information's out there on the guy, so it's not really much of a spoiler. But
so from one of the scenes in the trailer, you can see a dragon rising from the flames. Now, I'm assuming that scene would have looked amazing on the big screen. So my question here is, did this film translate to the big screen, or could it have easily have been adapted to like a TV documentary play kind of thing, straight to DVD, maybe even kind of productions?
I definitely think this could have been streamed, to TV. It is a very, despite some special effects in it like that, which actually do look pretty good, it is fairly low key. Like you could watch this on TV as a biopic film. A lot of films in a similar vein to this, I would say, like The Imitation Game, for example, it's more a film on that scale.
I'd say the Imitation Game actually felt like a film. What I'm asking is, did it feel like a straight to TV film?
No, it definitely felt like a film, but what I'm coming at it with, that you're not really missing out if you don't see this on the big screen. It doesn't really have that massive, oh my god, Lord of the Rings kind of scale to it, which of course it isn't, because it's not an adaptation of that. It's just on the guy's life who came up with it. Initially, I did have problems with this movie when it first started off, and I thought, I'm going to have a very miserable time with this movie. This is not going to be the movie that I was hoping it to be. My one concern going into cover with Tolkien's life leading all the way up, like there's even before he even started writing his books, there's a lot to cover. And I was hoping that they weren't going to jump around too much because they could spread themselves really thin. I wanted them to focus in on, I mean, I'd even be happy if they focus in on one particular point of his life and flesh that out rather than trying to cram everything in. And I'm very thankful that they didn't try to cram everything in. They did definitely focus it in. But the very beginning of the film, I would say probably the first 20 minutes or so, it did feel very choppy and it did feel very rushed and breezed over a lot of his stuff, especially regarding Tolkien's mother and him moving to Birmingham. That felt very, very abrupt, I would say. It's not until we get to him meeting his schoolmates, which eventually becomes the what's the club called? I've completely forgot. The TCBS, the Tea Club and Barovian Society, which is this society, this little club he has with three other people, three other academics who are into music and poetry and writing and things like that. When it gets to that stuff and it really, the scenes play out longer, there's more times to develop character and this fellowship and this friendship, that's this bond between all of them. That's when the film really picked up for me, and it sort of hit its stride after that point.
That's cool. So what I was, it was a question I was going to ask, but Brinsley has actually asked it in the comments. Does it focus on Lord of the Rings, or is it just his life?
I don't know how much I can give away. So it is just his life. They're similar to the scene that you mentioned with the dragon. There's a lot, and these are mostly in the trailer, actually, so I'm not really giving anything away here. The film is framed from the time frame point of him being in the war, because of course he was in the Battle of the Somme in the trenches during World War One, and from there he has moments where he recalls back and it almost flashes back to his life at school. But those flashbacks can last for a very long time, and then when you get to the war things, you realize, oh yeah, this was the framing device they were using for the film. So it definitely does take its time in that regard. The shots that you see in the trailer, you get like a sort of black hooded figure on a horse, which is very indicative of one of the ring wraiths from Lord of the Rings. You get a dragon. There's moments where, shells are exploding on the front and the smoke swirling up and forming almost a silhouette of Sauron and things like that.
That's cool.
But they're done very minimally, which I was very grateful for. There aren't loads of wink, wink, nudge, nudge moments to Lord of the Rings. There's a few in there. If you're at all familiar with the Lord of the Rings, even if you haven't read the books, but just like based on what the story involves and everything like that, you're going to pick up on all these moments. But they're used very sparingly. They're peppered throughout the movie. They're very effective. Towards the end of the movie, you do kind of get your nudging. I'm coming up with a story. It involves little people and an epic quest, and it's just like, I've read the Lord of the Rings too. I know exactly what you're referring to. And perhaps in that regard, I understand from a movie standpoint, they do need to nudge it in that direction because that's what people expect to see. But I do think there are a few discrepancies here and there with the timing that he began writing certain things. And I mean, it's a movie, it's a biopic. Nothing's ever going to be 100% accurate, unfortunately.
My next question here is about biopics in general and acting to go with them. Because with a lot of biopics, you obviously have a lot of the modern, at least, biopics. You at least have something to go off when making the character and actually retelling the character. I'm not sure on how many accounts there were of Tolkien's actual life and his appearance and his mannerisms and his actual personal life other than the stuff that was written. So my question here is, does I'm trying to remember his name, Nicholas Hoult, does Nicholas Hoult portray Tolkien as he is portrayed in at least how it's written? I know it isn't past history, but is it at least an accurate portrayal?
It's a great performance. He plays it very well. He handles the material very well. He hits all the emotional moments. But when you watch, and this is Tolkien from much later in his life, as he's just written The Lord of the Rings. It was like in the last 20 or so years of his life, somewhere around that point. I would say he doesn't really match the mannerism. Tolkien had this very dry, almost kind of sarcastic but very clever sense of humor. I mean, he was an Oxford professor, and I mean, the image that you're creating in your head of a stereotypical Oxford professor, that's the kind of guy that he was. Obviously, his writing was very clever and very whimsical, and especially when you get to The Lord of the Rings, incredibly so well thought out and constructed. Nicholas Hoult just sort of plays the material as he's given it. I didn't really see... If I didn't know it was based on the life of Tolkien, and I just saw this guy, I wouldn't immediately know it's Tolkien. But then again, I don't know personally for myself in terms of like visual and first-hand accounts. I don't know how different Tolkien was in his early years when he was at Oxford and when he was with the TCBS compared to later life when I've actually seen recorded interviews with him. But I mean, the performances were great across the board. Certainly, Nicholas Hoult and all the people that play other members of the TCBS. Derek Jacobi's in there as a small role. Derek Jacobi's always great. The one character I had a problem with was Lily Collins' portrayal of Edith Bratt, which is Tolkien's wife. Edith was Tolkien's muse. She was the love of his life. It was the inspiration for him to write such tales as Beren and Luthien and Arwen and Aragorn in his stories. This very romanticized image of this unconditional love, unbreaking love across the ages kind of thing. Even on their tombstones, they've got written Beren and Luthien on there. But I never really got a good sense of that relationship between them in the film. She plays it very selfish, very self-absorbed, and she's actually quite critical of his writing at some points. There's one very nice scene where she's teaching him the meaning of language, and he comes up with this original word, this beautiful sounding word, and she's trying to say that a word's beauty doesn't come from the sound of a word, it comes from the synergy of the sound and the actual meaning behind that word. And she kind of helps him construct, well, what does this word mean? Is it a kingdom? Where is this kingdom located? And he kind of comes up with all of his ideas. But later towards the film, she says, like, straight after he's come back from the war, she's like, look, you need to get on board with this writing thing, because he's struggling to write something. He can't really focus himself or get his ideas straight. She says, look, you need to either drop this thing or you need to get on and carry on writing now. And that to me doesn't seem like something Edith would do. That seems like a very harsh thing to say.
Yeah.
So I didn't care for their relationship, which I know is a big part of the film, and that did kind of let me down. But inherently, where the film focuses on, other than that, is this friendship between all of his comrades, starting in school together, having this shared love for all, art and literature and everything like that, and then going off to war. And a lot of them, in fact most of them, don't make it back alive. And it's that friendship that really carried it for me, and where most of the emotion from the film hit me.
Okay, awesome. And I guess my final question is, would you recommend this film to anyone?
I definitely recommend this film if you're a Tolkien fan, and I know we've got quite a lot of Tolkien fans in the comments right now. Definitely check it out. It's a good film. It's a solid film. Could it have been better? Probably. Like, maybe, I mean, it's just shy of 2 hours. You could have developed some more things. For example, they don't go into his later life, where he was part of the Inklings, which was a literature group of Oxford professors with the likes of C.S. Lewis, who wrote the Narnia books. They'd sort of spitball ideas that they were working on, and chapters and excerpts and everything like that. They don't go into that. It is inherently just the World War stuff, his relationship with Edith, and his friendship with his schoolmates. I definitely recommend it. There are some nice moments in there where he first starts to write The Hobbit, and there's like little lines here and there thrown in. That's always good. And it's just great performance. And I'm glad that we've got a Tolkien movie. I definitely think that it was a worthy biopic to be made. Could it have been made better? Sure. But I had a good time with it. And if you're at all a fan of Lord of the Rings, or if you've read any of Tolkien's works in the past, you're going to get some enjoyment out of it.
Okay, awesome. I have no more questions.
No further questions, Your Honor. Okay. Sorry, just reading some of the comments in the side.
Sure, that's fine.
I mean, this is a really short review. There's not really
much. Sorry. Very quickly, Jake's the editor. Massachusetts, really, those are where the best universities are. Come on, really. Oxford, Cambridge are the best 2 universities in the world. Everyone knows that.
Well, it's like that line from Blackadder. The greatest universities, Oxford, Cambridge, and Hull. You're right. Oxford is a complete dump. Like, so that'll do it for my review on Tolkien. There are so many movies out in May. I wasn't even aware of how many movies are out this month. Curse of La Lorna. We've got Aladdin, Detective Pikachu next week. John Wick Chapter 3. So the movies are kicking into summer movie season. We're slowly getting there, and I will try and do my very best to get to all of these movies. Hopefully we don't get as many stinkers as we did with Hellboy. And thank you to everyone in the comments who's joined us today for this very short review. And until the next video, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.